Her laughter sliced through the air like a whip, sharp, loud, and merciless. "You? In my class?" sneered Claire Donovan, her voice echoing across the polished floor of the Silvercrest dojo. "That uniform doesn't even fit you right." Everyone heard it. The students, the parents waiting by the door, even the assistants froze mid-step. Their teacher, a fifth-degree black belt, had just humiliated someone who didn't even speak back. The janitor. Standing at the far end of the hall was Evelyn Brooks, holding her broom like a staff of quiet dignity. She didn't flinch. Her gaze was calm, steady, unbothered. That silence unsettled Claire more than any insult could have. The dojo, usually filled with the rhythmic sound of punches and disciplined shouts, now pulsed with tension. A few students shifted awkwardly, unsure whether to laugh or look away. They had seen Claire angry before, but never insecure. It was a bright Saturday morning, sunlight streaming through the wide windows. Posters of martial arts legends hung proudly on the walls, alongside Claire's trophies and certificates. Silvercrest Dojo was her empire. Every inch of the place reflected her obsession with perfection. Clean lines, sharp movements, unwavering respect. Respect, of course, as long as it flowed toward her. Evelyn had joined the staff 2 months earlier, quiet and invisible like most janitors. In her late 30s, with streaks of gray woven into her hair, she carried herself with quiet precision. Every sweep of her broom seemed intentional, measured, rhythmic. But to Claire, she was just another worker. Someone whose presence was necessary, yet forgettable. Until that morning. The dojo was preparing for a high-profile demonstration. Judges, sponsors, parents, all coming to watch Claire's students perform. Everything needed to be flawless. But when Evelyn accidentally stepped onto the matted floor to sweep a corner, Claire's pride flared like a struck match. "You can't walk here," she snapped. The words hit the room like a slap. Evelyn looked up, surprised but calm. "I'm sorry," she said softly, stepping back. The instructor's jaw tightened. There was no fear in that apology, only composure. It made Claire's chest tighten in a way she couldn't explain. She turned away, pretending to focus on her students, but her eyes lingered. Something about that woman, that stillness, felt like defiance. When the event ended and applause filled the dojo, Claire stood basking in praise. But her gaze kept drifting toward Evelyn, rolling up the mats. Each movement was graceful, almost rehearsed. And though she didn't know it yet, Claire had just crossed paths with the one person who would dismantle her arrogance. Not through power, but through patience. Sunday morning arrived crisp and clear. The wooden floors of Silvercrest Dojo glowed under the soft golden light that spilled through the high windows. The air was quiet, filled only with the rhythmic thuds of practice kicks. Claire Donovan, dressed in her black uniform, edged with gold stitching, moved like a queen in her domain. Every step, every command, echoed with confidence and pride. Across the room, Evelyn Brooks was sweeping the mats with her usual calm precision. She worked early, long before the next class began, careful not to disturb the students. But today, Claire's eyes followed her every movement, as if that calm presence reminded her of something she couldn't control. Claire leaned against the mirrored wall, watching. "Funny," she said, loud enough for her students to hear, "how some people think wearing a uniform makes them one of us. A few students exchanged nervous glances. No one laughed. Not really, but Claire smiled anyway. A cruel, forced smile that demanded approval. Evelyn paused, her broom still in motion, then looked up slowly. Her eyes were steady, kind, and unbothered. She said nothing. Claire hated that silence. It felt like defiance wrapped in humility. To fill the quiet, she began a display. High kicks, lightning-fast strikes, elegant spins, each move sharper than the last. The students clapped, trying to keep up with her energy. Claire thrived on it. The applause was her armor, her proof of superiority. And when she noticed Evelyn watching from the corner, she decided to twist the knife deeper. "Have you ever trained, Evelyn?" Claire asked mockingly. "Or is sweeping floors your martial art?" The words hung in the air like poison. The students froze. Evelyn smiled faintly. "Just doing my job," she replied gently, returning to her sweeping. But Claire wasn't done. She grabbed a broom from the wall, mimicking Evelyn's movements with exaggerated karate poses. "Look, everyone, cleaning kata," she announced, pretending to strike and sweep at once. Laughter erupted, uneasy, forced, but loud enough to fill the room. Evelyn stood still, her expression unreadable. Then quietly, she set her broom aside and walked out of the dojo without a word. The door closed softly behind her, but the silence it left behind was deafening. For a moment, even Claire felt something sting. Not guilt, but discomfort. She brushed it away quickly, laughing again as if nothing had happened. "Come on," she said briskly, "back to training." Yet, as the day went on, her mind kept replaying that look on Evelyn's face. Not hurt, not anger, but something deeper. Peaceful, controlled. It was a look that didn't belong to a janitor. It belonged to someone who had seen much more. Someone who understood something Claire did not. And though Claire didn't realize it yet, that calm silence was the beginning of her greatest lesson, one that would soon shake the very foundation of her pride. The next morning, Silvercrest Dojo buzzed with its usual rhythm. The shuffle of bare feet on mats, the soft slap of practice punches, and Claire Donovan's sharp, commanding voice echoing across the hall. Her students admired her precision, but also feared her temper. Claire was perfection embodied, or so she believed. She walked in expecting another flawless day, but something immediately felt off. Standing among the students waiting for class to begin was Evelyn Brooks, not with her broom this time, but in a plain white training gi. Her hair was tied neatly, her posture upright, her gaze calm. Claire's eyes narrowed. "You can't be serious," she said with a forced laugh. "This is the advanced class." Evelyn bowed slightly. "I just wanted to learn," she replied softly. The students looked from one woman to the other, sensing the tension thickening in the air. Claire's pride flared. This was her territory, her rules. How dare a janitor step onto her floor as a student? "Fine," Claire said finally, her voice dripping with mock politeness. "If you want to learn, you'll learn properly." Let's begin. From the first moment, it was clear that Claire intended to make Evelyn a public example. Every drill she assigned was harsher than necessary. Every instruction came laced with sarcasm. When Evelyn's punch didn't land perfectly, Claire smirked. When her stance wobbled slightly, Claire's tone turned cold. "Balance, Evelyn," she barked. "You need balance to stand, not to sweep." A few students chuckled nervously, unsure whether to laugh or stay quiet. Evelyn, however, remained composed. She listened. She followed. She adjusted. Her movements were slow, deliberate, not the clumsy efforts of a beginner, but the careful precision of someone remembering. By the middle of the session, a subtle shift had begun. Evelyn's form grew sharper. Her timing improved. Her breathing matched the rhythm of trained fighters. The students began watching her instead of Claire. That didn't go unnoticed. Claire's smile faded as she circled Evelyn, studying her stance more closely now. She said slowly. You're catching on fast. Evelyn simply nodded. Thank you, instructor. There was no arrogance in her voice, no challenge. Yet something about her tone made Claire's stomach twist. It wasn't submission. It was quiet assurance. As the class ended, Claire dismissed the students early, claiming she needed to review tomorrow's drills. But her eyes stayed fixed on Evelyn as she bowed, picked up her bag, and left with graceful ease. Once the room was empty, Claire stood alone in the silent dojo, the scent of sweat and cedar lingering around her. She clenched her fists, staring at her reflection in the wall-length mirror. For the first time in years, she felt it. Doubt. Who was this woman who moved like she had trained all her life, yet spoke like she had nothing to prove? The next morning, Silver Crest Dojo shimmered under the warm sunlight streaming through its tall windows. Students filed in one by one, unaware that the air already held the weight of an unspoken storm. Claire Donovan stood at the center, arms folded, her expression cool but tight with hidden irritation. Every time her eyes landed on Evelyn Brooks, a spark of discomfort stirred deep inside her, something between curiosity and threat. Evelyn bowed politely as class began, her movements graceful, precise, and unforced. She blended effortlessly among the students, her white GI spotless, her presence strangely magnetic. Claire noticed that the others had started watching Evelyn during drills, not out of pity, but admiration. That subtle shift in attention felt like betrayal. Pair up, Claire ordered sharply. We'll practice defensive sparring today. The students hurried to find partners. Claire's gaze settled on Evelyn. She hesitated for only a second before saying, Brooks, you're with me. The room fell silent. Even the sound of bare feet on mats seemed to fade away. A few students exchanged nervous glances. They all knew what this meant. The instructor was about to make a point. Evelyn bowed deeply. Yes, instructor. Claire smiled faintly, but her eyes were sharp. Let's see what you've learned. They took their stances, bowing once more. The moment Claire straightened, she lunged forward with lightning speed. A sharp jab aimed at Evelyn's shoulder. Evelyn sidestepped smoothly, her movement fluid and effortless. Claire attacked again, harder this time. A spinning kick, a fast follow-up strike. Evelyn blocked both with seamless precision, her body moving as if it already knew what was coming. Gasps rippled through the students. Claire's pride burned. She gritted her teeth and pressed forward, her strikes growing wilder, faster, desperate to regain dominance. But Evelyn was no longer reacting. She was anticipating. Each counter was cleaner, quieter, more controlled. Then, in one swift blur, Evelyn turned, caught Claire's wrist mid-strike, and pivoted with a smooth motion that sent the instructor tumbling onto the mat. The thud echoed through the hall. Silence. Claire lay on her back, staring up at the ceiling, her breath caught in her throat. For a moment, she couldn't move. The woman she had mocked, the janitor she had dismissed, had just put her on the ground without breaking a sweat. Evelyn stepped back respectfully, bowed deeply, and spoke softly. "Respect, instructor." Her tone wasn't arrogant. It was gentle, almost forgiving. And somehow, that stung far more than the fall itself. Claire got up slowly, her pride trembling inside her chest. She forced a nod, her lips pressed into a thin line. "Class dismissed," she said hoarsely. The students bowed and dispersed quietly, whispering among themselves. Evelyn picked up her bag, bowed once more, and walked out. Claire watched her go, feeling the floor still vibrating beneath her feet from that single, humbling moment. For years, she had believed power came from strength, but now, for the first time, she began to realize true strength might look a lot like silence. The dojo felt different the next day. The chatter was quieter, the energy subdued. Even the students, once eager to impress Claire Donovan, seemed hesitant to speak too loudly. They had witnessed something that had shaken the very hierarchy of Silvercrest Dojo, their invincible instructor being effortlessly defeated by the janitor they once ignored. Claire arrived earlier than usual that morning. The polished wooden floor gleamed under the lights, and the faint scent of pine filled the air. She stood in front of the mirror, staring at her reflection. Her bruised pride was far more painful than the faint ache in her shoulder. Every time she blinked, she saw Evelyn Brooks' calm eyes, not mocking, not gloating, but full of a quiet authority that didn't need to prove itself. When the students began to arrive, Claire's voice carried less sharpness. "Warm up," she said simply. Her tone lacked its usual edge. For the first time, she noticed how heavy silence could feel. Later that day, when the class ended and the dojo emptied, Claire lingered behind. She found Evelyn kneeling by the equipment racks, folding towels neatly, her movements graceful and deliberate. For a moment, Claire just watched. The humility, the precision, the peace that surrounded her. Then, unable to contain her curiosity any longer, she asked, "Where did you learn to move like that?" Evelyn looked up, surprised but calm. "Move like what?" "Like someone who's been training her whole life," Claire replied quietly. Evelyn smiled faintly. "It's been a long time since I trained seriously," she said. "Sometimes the body remembers what the mind tries to forget." Claire frowned. That wasn't beginner skill. "Who are you, really?" Evelyn didn't answer directly. She stood, picked up the folded towels, and said softly, "Someone who once believed that strength and respect could coexist, until the world convinced her otherwise." Then she bowed politely and left the room, leaving Claire standing amidst 1,000 unspoken questions. That night, curiosity refused to let Claire sleep. She sat at her desk, laptop open, typing Evelyn Brooks Martial Arts into the search bar. At first, there was nothing. But then, buried under years of forgotten articles, she found it. A faded headline from a decade ago. "Evelyn Brooks wins national championship. First woman of color to take gold in 5 years." Claire's heart raced as she clicked through old interviews, photos, and news clippings. There she was, younger, fierce, unstoppable. A black belt champion celebrated for her speed and discipline. But as the timeline continued, the headlines grew darker. Champion resigns from National Federation, cites discrimination and bias. Evelyn Brooks leaves martial arts scene amid controversy. Claire leaned back in her chair, staring at the screen. A woman who had once stood at the top of the world had been reduced to cleaning floors in silence, not because she lost skill, but because she had lost faith in the fairness of the system. For the first time, shame prickled Claire's conscience. The arrogance she once wore like armor now felt heavy, suffocating. She had mocked not a janitor, but a master who had chosen humility over bitterness. And deep down, Claire knew this wasn't the end of their story. It was only the beginning of her awakening. The morning after her discovery, Claire Donovan entered Silvercrest Dojo with a heaviness she couldn't shake. The air felt different, sharper, colder. Every corner of the dojo reminded her of the pride that had ruled her for years. She had spent her life chasing perfection, collecting belts, trophies, and applause. But none of those victories had humbled her the way Evelyn Brooks had, with a single, effortless throw. For the first time in a long time, Claire didn't correct her students' stances or bark commands. She simply watched them, really watched them. Their mistakes, their eagerness, their quiet fear of disappointing her. And as she observed, she saw herself, the old Claire who once equated authority with superiority. When the class ended, she lingered by the window, lost in thought. Evelyn was there again, mopping the floor with her usual calm rhythm. The soft swish of the mop seemed almost meditative, each stroke steady and precise. Claire hesitated before walking closer. "Evelyn," she said quietly. Evelyn looked up, her expression neutral but kind. "Yes, instructor? I looked you up," Claire admitted, her voice uncertain. "I found your old matches, your interviews, everything." Evelyn's hands paused for a moment, but she didn't look surprised. "I figured you might," she said softly. "You were incredible," Claire continued, almost whispering. "A national champion." "Why did you stop?" Evelyn wrung out the mop, her eyes distant. "Because sometimes the fight outside the ring hurts more than the one inside it," she said. "When your worth is questioned for things that have nothing to do with skill, your skin, your gender, your place, you start to wonder what winning even means." Claire nodded slowly, guilt pressing against her chest. "I'm sorry," she murmured, "for how I treated you." Evelyn gave a faint smile. "You don't owe me an apology, Claire. Arrogance is just ignorance in disguise. We've all worn it once." The words landed deep. Claire lowered her gaze. "Still, you didn't deserve my disrespect." Evelyn looked at her for a long moment, then placed the mop aside. "Respect isn't something we're given," she said gently, "and it's something we live." Claire felt her throat tighten. "Will you teach me?" she asked impulsively. Evelyn's brow furrowed. "Teach you what?" "How to find balance," Claire said. "Not in my stance, in myself." Evelyn studied her, eyes searching for sincerity. After a pause, she nodded. "Then start by unlearning. You can't fill a cup that's already full." For the first time, Claire bowed, deeply, sincerely, not as an instructor, but as a student. That evening, as the dojo emptied and the sun dipped below the horizon, Claire stayed behind, sweeping the floor herself. The wooden surface gleamed under the fading light. Each stroke of the broom felt humbling, grounding, real. In the quiet rhythm of cleaning, she began her first true lesson, the art of humility. The days that followed unfolded like a quiet transformation. Silvercrest Dojo no longer echoed with harsh commands or the sting of arrogance. Instead, a strange calm began to fill its space, the kind that comes when pride begins to dissolve into awareness. Claire Donovan found herself arriving early, staying late, and moving differently. She no longer barked at students or demanded perfection in every stance. Instead, she corrected gently, often demonstrating by example. To her surprise, her students responded better. Their movements grew more confident, their focus sharper. But the real change began in the evenings, after the last class ended, when Evelyn Brooks stayed behind to clean and Claire quietly joined her. At first, Evelyn said nothing. She simply mopped, while Claire swept, both moving in silence. The sound of bristles against the floor became their rhythm, an unspoken conversation between two women who no longer stood on opposite sides of pride. One evening, as the last rays of sunset slipped through the dojo windows, Claire finally broke the silence. "Do you ever miss it?" she asked. "Competing? The crowd? The medals?" Evelyn looked up, her eyes soft but distant. "Sometimes," she said, "but medals rust, applause fades. What stays is the discipline, and the peace you earn from knowing who you are." Claire smiled faintly. "I don't think I ever knew who I was outside this place." "That's because you built your worth on how loud people clapped," Evelyn replied gently. "Real strength doesn't need an audience." The word struck deep. Claire set the broom aside and sat cross-legged on the mat. "You sound like a teacher," she said quietly. "I was one once," Evelyn replied, joining her on the floor, "until I realized I had forgotten my own lessons." Claire hesitated before asking, "Will you teach me again?" "Not techniques, the other part. The part I missed." Evelyn studied her for a long moment. "Only if you're willing to listen without defense," she said. "I am," Claire said sincerely. And so, the lessons began. Not in the daylight classes where Claire led students, but in the quiet hours afterward, when the dojo emptied and humility filled the air. Evelyn guided her through meditation, breathing, and balance exercises. At first, Claire struggled. Her mind was restless, her ego restless still. But Evelyn's patience was infinite. "Don't fight your thoughts," she would say softly. "Let them pass like wind through open doors." Slowly, Claire began to change. Her movements grew lighter, her tone gentler. She started smiling more, laughing even. The students noticed. So did the parents. The once intimidating instructor now carried a calm authority that drew people closer. Evelyn, however, remained in the background, steady, grounded, content. She never asked for recognition or acknowledgement. For her, the dojo wasn't a stage. It was a sanctuary. One night, as they finished sweeping together, Claire looked at her and said quietly, "I used to think you were invisible, but now I realize you were the only one truly present." Evelyn smiled. "Sometimes you see clearer when you stop looking down on others." And in that gentle sentence, Claire understood. Respect wasn't something you demanded. It was something you became. A week later, Silvercrest Dojo was buzzing again. Banners hung from the ceiling, chairs lined the walls, and parents filled the observation area. It was the annual open demonstration, a day when students showcased their progress and the dojo welcomed new members. For Claire Donovan, this event had always been about reputation. It was where she showed off her best students, impressed the judges, and cemented her image as the flawless instructor. But this time, something was different. The weight of pride that once drove her was gone. In its place was a strange calm, fragile, but real. Evelyn Brooks was there too, mopping a far corner of the room before the event began. She moved with her usual quiet grace, unnoticed by most. But when Claire entered the room, she walked straight toward her. "Leave the mop," she said softly. "Sit with the audience today." Evelyn raised an eyebrow. "I'm fine where I am." "I insist," Claire said with a small, respectful smile. "You've earned a front row seat." Evelyn studied her for a moment, then nodded, setting the mop aside. For the first time, she took a seat among the parents and guests. As the event began, the dojo filled with energy. Students of all ages performed forms, sparring routines, and self-defense drills. Claire watched them with pride, not in herself, but in them. She noticed details she had never cared about before. The trembling hands of nervous beginners, the proud smiles of parents, the determination in young faces. Halfway through the program, one of the senior students, a teenage boy named Alex, froze mid-demonstration. His mind went blank under the pressure of the crowd. In the past, Claire would have barked a correction, her tone sharp and impatient. But now, she walked to him slowly, placed a gentle hand on his shoulder, and whispered something the audience couldn't hear. Alex closed his eyes, breathed, and started again, slower, steadier, better. The crowd clapped. Claire bowed, smiling. Evelyn watched from the sidelines, her expression unreadable but proud. Then, as the final segment approached, the instructor's showcase, a judge stepped forward. "Miss Donovan," he said, "will you demonstrate one of your signature techniques?" A murmur swept through the room. For years, this was the moment Claire lived for. But this time, she hesitated. Instead, she turned toward Evelyn. "Would you join me?" she asked, her voice steady. The room fell silent. Evelyn blinked in surprise. "Claire, this is your stage." "It was never mine," Claire said softly. "It belongs to everyone who taught me something, even when I didn't deserve it." Reluctantly, Evelyn stood and walked onto the mat. The two women bowed deeply to each other. Then they began. The movements were fluid, a blend of power and grace, teacher and student flowing in harmony. Every strike, every block, every counter was balanced by mutual respect. No ego, no showmanship, just truth. When the final bow came, the room erupted in applause. But Claire didn't look at the judges or the crowd. She looked only at Evelyn. And for the first time, both women smiled, not as instructor and janitor, but as equals who had finally understood what martial arts was meant to teach. Not victory, but balance. The applause from the demonstration still echoed in Silvercrest Dojo long after the guests had left. The mats were rolled up, the banners taken down, and the golden light of late afternoon poured gently through the tall windows. For once, the dojo didn't feel like a place of performance. It felt alive, peaceful, grounded. whole. Claire Donovan stood at the center of the room, her heart still steady from the sparring she had shared with Evelyn Brooks. The moment replayed in her mind like a vivid dream. The calm rhythm of their movements, the grace in their bow, the way silence had filled the hall afterward, not with awkwardness, but awe. For years, she had believed that mastery came from dominance. That power meant control. But now she understood. The greatest mastery was surrender. The kind of surrender that wasn't weakness, but wisdom. Letting go of ego so something purer could rise in its place. When the last of the students left, Claire turned to Evelyn, who was quietly folding towels near the back wall. "You knew this would happen, didn't you?" Claire asked softly. Evelyn smiled faintly. "Not this exactly, but I knew that if you listened long enough, the noise inside you would fade." Claire laughed lightly. "You make it sound so simple." "It's not," Evelyn replied. "That's why most people never do it." Over the next few weeks, the dojo began to change. Students noticed their instructor's new tone. Calm, patient, sincere. Parents who once found Claire intimidating now spoke of her warmth. Enrollment even grew, not because of flashy performances or trophies, but because word spread about a place where martial arts meant more than fighting. Claire introduced a new rule to the dojo: the bow of gratitude. Every class, before and after training, students would bow not only to their instructor, but also to the person who cleaned the floor, maintained the mats, or brought the water. Because respect, Claire said, isn't a rank. It's a choice. Evelyn watched this evolution quietly from the background. She still cleaned, still moved in silence. But now, every student greeted her with a bow and a smile. The once invisible janitor had become the quiet heart of the dojo, the symbol of humility itself. One evening, after the final class ended, Claire found Evelyn sitting alone by the window, gazing out at the fading sunset. "You could come back, you know," Claire said softly. "Teach again. The students would learn more from you than from me." Evelyn shook her head with a peaceful smile. "I'm teaching already, Claire. Just not in the way people expect." Claire sat beside her. For a long time, they said nothing. The dojo was silent, except for the distant hum of the city and the faint creak of the wooden floor beneath them. "I used to think strength was about winning," Claire said finally. "Now I think it's about seeing others, seeing yourself." Evelyn nodded. "Then you've learned the real art." Outside, the last light of day melted into twilight, and for the first time in years, Silvercrest Dojo stood not as a monument to ego, but as a temple of respect. Weeks turned into months, and Silvercrest Dojo found its new rhythm, quieter, warmer, deeper. What was once a place of rigid hierarchy had become a space of shared growth. The mirrors that had once reflected pride now reflected balance. Every bow, every movement, every breath carried a sense of purpose. For Claire Donovan, each morning felt like a new beginning. She no longer sought applause, trophies, or perfection. She sought understanding. The lessons she once dismissed as philosophical fluff had become her compass. And every time she stepped onto the mat, she remembered the words Evelyn Brooks had said that night. Respect isn't something you're given. It's something you live. Her students noticed the difference. They spoke to her more openly now, laughed with her, even asked questions without fear. Parents who once found her intimidating now trusted her completely. Under her guidance, the dojo no longer chased medals. It built character. But for Claire, the greatest lesson still came from Evelyn. One winter evening, as snow began to fall softly outside, Claire found Evelyn sweeping the entrance hallway. The faint hum of an old heater filled the room, blending with the rhythm of the broom. Claire leaned against the wall, watching for a while, before saying quietly, "You could have taken back your old life, you know. The competitions, the fame, even teaching again." Evelyn smiled without looking up. "Fame doesn't last, Claire. Peace does." Claire nodded, understanding now in a way she never had before. "I think I finally know what strength means," she said. Evelyn paused mid-sweep. "And what's that?" "It's not about how many people you can defeat," Claire said slowly. "It's about how many hearts you can touch without breaking your own." Evelyn's smile deepened. "Then you've learned what most masters never do." They stood there for a moment, two women from different worlds, bound by one truth. Humility was the highest form of power. As weeks passed, Claire decided to honor Evelyn in her own quiet way. She had a new banner made for the dojo. It hung above the entrance, painted in bold, black letters. "True mastery begins where ego ends." Every new student who entered bowed beneath it, a silent reminder of the story the dojo carried. Evelyn continued her work quietly, refusing recognition. Yet everyone knew who she was now, not as the janitor, but as the heart of the dojo. Children brought her tea, parents greeted her warmly, and even visiting black belts bowed respectfully before her. One evening, as Claire locked up after class, she found Evelyn sitting cross-legged in the center of the mat, eyes closed in peaceful meditation. The broom rested beside her like an old companion. Claire whispered softly, "Thank you for everything." Evelyn opened her eyes and smiled. "Then keep teaching it forward." Claire nodded, bowing deeply before leaving the hall. The dojo lights dimmed. The world outside hushed. And in that silence, something eternal remained. A legacy, not of victory, but of virtue. Because in the end, strength isn't found in power or position. It lives in grace, in restraint, and in the quiet dignity of those who choose respect over pride. And sometimes, the greatest master of all is the one still holding the broom.